Tonight, I invite you to drift with me into a world of revolution and passion, where empires rise and hearts shatter beneath the weight of history. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte and Joséphine de Beauharnais, a love blazing fiercely amidst the fires of change, a bond both fragile and relentless, carved by ambition, betrayal, and devotion. Their love was no mere private affair. It forged crowns, toppled alliances, and bound the balance of Europe to the beating of two hearts. Together, they walked the razor's edge of destiny in a world remade by revolution, where power meant survival and love meant risking it all. Before you settle in, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel and tell me where in the world you're listening from. The world feels a little smaller when we're all connected by love. Let us begin. It is 1795, and Paris holds its breath, draped in the heavy silence. Just a year ago, the reign of terror gripped France, a time when fear ruled the streets and the guillotine never rested. Led by the radical revolutionary Maximilien Robespierre, it was a purge in the name of virtue. Tens of thousands executed as enemies of the revolution, the French Revolution, an uprising that had overthrown the monarchy of King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, and dreamed of a new society built on liberty, equality, and fraternity. Nobles, priests, political rivals, even ordinary citizens were accused of being threats to the cause. No one was safe. It ended only when Robespierre himself was sent to the scaffold, the wooden platform where the guillotine stood, claiming life after life in the name of justice. What is left governing France is a body of 5 men called the Directory. Born from chaos and ashes, it struggles to hold a fractured France together. The streets pulse with desperation and wary hope. Veterans limp alongside beggars. Former nobles slip quietly among the crowds. Spies lurk in every corner, trading loyalty for survival. In the midst of this fractured city walks Joséphine de Beauharnais, a beauty forged by loss and resilience. Born Marie-Joseph Rosé Taché de la Pagerie, she left the warmth of Martinique for a Paris steeped in blood and suspicion. Her first husband, Alexandre de Beauharnais, fell to the terror's blade. She survived by charm, a cunning wit, and an iron will beneath her gentle grace, traits that would soon help steady the course of a nation. She is 32 years old, and a survivor in every sense of the word. Into this perilous world steps Napoleon Bonaparte, 26, burning with ambition, haunted by exile. His victories at Toulon and his ruthless quelling of royalist uprisings have marked him as both savior and threat. The future of France teeters, and in him, the Directory glimpses both hope and danger. He is a brilliant young general in the French army, but Napoleon is an outsider. Born on the rugged island of Corsica, recently annexed by France, he is seen by many as foreign, rough-edged, and dangerously driven. Yet, that same outsider status makes him all the more unpredictable and soon to be unstoppable. Their meeting is unassuming. A glance exchanged in a salon where music drifts over murmured plots. Joséphine, recently freed from calm prison, carries the weight of survival. Once a monastery, Reims had become a blood-soaked prison during the Revolution, a place where the guillotine waited for thousands, including her, until the fall of Robespierre ended the reign of terror. Napoleon is drawn to her poised strength, the grace that Paris's fractured heart longs for. Joséphine sees in him a force as unpredictable as the storm that swept away the old order, a man whose destiny could raise her or ruin her. The moment hums with unspoken promise, the first step on a path where love and ambition will entwine, reshaping not only their lives, but the future of Europe itself. Paris breathes again, but beneath the glittering chandeliers of its salons, ambition and suspicion weave through every word. The wounds of the revolution are raw. In every dance, every toast, every whispered exchange, fortunes are made and unmade. Napoleon moves with restless energy, a man caught between soldier and dreamer. His letters to Joséphine overflow with longing, raw, unguarded, almost fevered. His heart, untempered by the court's polished games, burns for her. In his words, passion and obsession blur. Each night your image haunts me, your voice, a melody that drives me mad. Your absence, a wound no victory can heal. Joséphine, flattered and unsettled, walks a delicate path. His passion stirs something deep within her, but caution tempers her response. She has learned that in this world, love can be both refuge and snare. She weighs Napoleon's fervor against the independence she fought to protect and the fragile security she has carved for her children. But it is not only his heart he offers. His love draws him into Paris's tangled web of power. Their union becomes more than personal. It lends him legitimacy, opens doors once closed to the Corsican outsider, and through Joséphine, salons that once sneered now speak his name with respect. Their courtship plays out like a careful game of strategy, part seduction, part negotiation. Napoleon, unaccustomed to restraint, floods her with letters, declarations that swing between poetic longing and possessive need. Joséphine, seasoned by loss and survival, moves more cautiously, weighing every gesture, every word, with the instinct of a woman who knows how fragile safety can be. He sends tokens from his campaigns, rare silks, polished relics, handwritten lines inked with obsession. She answers in measured tones, enough to stoke his desire, never enough to surrender. For Joséphine, this is more than romance. It is a decision that could define her children's future, and perhaps even the fate of France, as Napoleon is rapidly rising through the ranks. Under pressure from his growing fame and her own uncertain feelings, they marry in a quiet civil ceremony on March 9th, 1796. 2 days later, he leaves for Italy. The wedding is rushed, the ink barely dry on their vows, when he mounts his horse and rides into history. He is aflame with love and ambition. She stays behind, unsure, reluctant, already drifting. Their union sends ripples through Paris, a Corsican general and a widowed aristocrat, suddenly bound together, not just in love, but in something more dangerous, a force that will tilt the fate of empires. Napoleon rides toward Italy, burning with ambition and longing. It is now 1796, and he has just been given command of the French army in Italy, a struggling force expected to distract Austria and the Habsburg Empire, one of France's greatest enemies. European monarchies trying to suppress the spread of revolutionary ideas from France and stopped the French Republic from expanding its influence. But Napoleon has other plans. He turns a weak campaign into a series of stunning victories at Montnotte, Lodi, and Castiglione. He defeats larger, better-equipped armies, forcing monarchs to retreat and forcing new republics to rise in their place. Each victory raises France's power across Europe. Every city he conquers changes the shape of the continent. But behind the banners and cannon smoke, it is Joséphine who haunts him. Her name scribbled in the margins of his orders, her face vivid in his mind, even amid the chaos of war. His letters ache with need. Without you, even glory tastes bitter. But in Paris, another storm brews. Joséphine, caught in the glittering web of salons and schemes, is drawn to Hippolyte Charles, a charming officer whose recklessness masks ambition. Their affair, whispered from parlor to parlor, becomes a secret too dangerous to contain. When word reaches Napoleon, it cuts deeper than any blade. The heart that once steadied his march fractures, and with it, the image of unity that France's enemies had begun to fear. By now, he is no longer just a general, he is France's most celebrated commander, wielding more power than the government that sent him to war. His victories have redrawn the map of Europe, and the Directory watches him with a mix of admiration and dread. But betrayal has its own gravity. Rivals at court and abroad sense the crack, and the old powers watch for a chance to strike. Their reunion is tender, but the shadows of infidelity cling. In private, they embrace. In public, they must rebuild the image of harmony. For in their bond, as in his conquests, the future of Europe is entwined. It is now 1798. The Mediterranean is restless, dark waves crashing against wooden hulls, bearing the weight of 1,000 men and one man's dream. France sends its rising star eastward, not merely to conquer, but to etch his name into eternity. At the prow of his flagship, Napoleon Bonaparte stands silent, wind tangling through his hair, his eyes fixed beyond the horizon. Egypt, a land cloaked in mystery, ancient even before Rome calls to him like a fevered vision. He speaks not only of war, but of civilization, of unlocking secrets buried beneath desert sands, of empire not just in land, but in time. Behind him sail not just soldiers, but scholars and engineers, a floating republic of ideas. This is no ordinary campaign. This is legacy in the making. The Egyptian sun greets them with brutal light. It sears the skin, blinds the eyes, wilts even the hardiest resolve. Men collapse in the heat, uniforms stained with salt and blood. Cairo rises like a mirage, minarets piercing a haze of dust and smoke. The air is thick with spice, prayer, and secrets, and in its heart, Napoleon moves like a man possessed. He walks among ruins, older than kings, tracing hieroglyphs with reverent fingers, dreaming not just of battle, but of immortality. He speaks of founding a new empire, one that stretches from the Nile to the Alps, an empire of mind as much as might. But even beneath this grand vision, something more human stirs. Each night, when the desert falls quiet and the stars burn cold above the dunes, he retreats to his tent and writes. To Joséphine, "Without you," he pens, "the world is ash in my mouth." His letters are soaked in longing, frantic, tender, and aching. He clings to her memory like a man to the last flame in a darkening world. But silence answers him. In Paris, Joséphine drifts through salons and sunlit gardens, wrapped in silk, surrounded by laughter and whispers. Her affair with Hippolyte Charles continues. Once discreet, has become dangerous. Rivals take note. The court circles like wolves. At Malmaison, her estate blooms, exotic orchids and rare roses, a sanctuary of elegance, but beneath the surface, restlessness coils. She reads Napoleon's letters, sometimes, but her replies are slow and guarded. And then, disaster. The Battle of the Nile at Aboukir Bay ensues. A stretch of sea near the Egyptian coast, not far from Alexandria, where the dream unravels. British cannon fire rains down from the water. Admiral Nelson's warships tearing through the anchored French fleet in a surprise night attack. Explosions light the sky, masts shatter. The Mediterranean churns with death. Napoleon's ships are destroyed. His lifeline to France cut. The Egyptian campaign, once meant to crown him with eternal glory and carve a new empire in the East, ends in disaster. He is stranded, alone, defeated. And still, he does not break. He escapes, slipping through the British blockade, racing back to France. Not for politics, not for power, but for her. Because if Joséphine no longer waits for him, if the bond they built has truly broken, then all the victories in the world will mean nothing. When he returns, Paris is holding its breath. Joséphine greets him with polished grace, but the warmth that once steadied him flickers. He embraces her, but in his eyes, the shadow remains. They walk through their gardens, through the halls of Malmaison, speaking softly, touching lightly, but never as before. A fracture has formed, and though it may heal, the scar will remain. And the world watches, because the fate of an empire now rests not only in his hands, but in her heart. France trembles, hollowed by hunger, fractured by fear. The ideals of the revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, lie buried beneath corruption and collapse. The Directory, once a promise of balance, has become a theater of whispers and bribes, paralyzed by indecision and eaten from within. In this vacuum of power, one name surges like a tidal wave. Napoleon. He returns from Egypt, not in shame, but in silence. A soldier turned savior, unshaken by defeat, glowing with destiny. Paris welcomes him not as a man, but as a force. The coup of 18 Brumaire is swift, bloodless, surgical. In a matter of hours, Napoleon overthrows the Directory, the fragile government that ruled after the Reign of Terror, and replaces it with a new regime. The consulate, with himself at its head, and beside him stands Joséphine. She moves through the reshaped court with practiced grace. Her presence calms the wary, flatters the powerful, charms even the most skeptical nobles who once scorned the Corsican upstart. She wears power like perfume, not heavy, not loud, but impossible to ignore. She hosts salons filled with art, music, and persuasion, orchestrating alliances as deftly as Napoleon commands armies. Her past, once a stain, now lends her mystique. Her name carries both scandal and softness. A woman who survived the terror and now rules the rooms where Paris once trembled. They are no longer simply lovers. Together, they are the visible balance of steel and silk, conquest and civility, ambition and beauty. Joséphine is the mirror through which the world accepts Napoleon as more than a general. She softens his edges, legitimizes his presence among kings, and for a time, their power seems eternal. Roads are rebuilt, laws reformed, the Franks stabilized. The Concordat with the Pope restores religion to a weary nation. France rises from its knees, not as a republic, but as something new, something imperial. But even as their vision expands, a shadow lingers in the halls of the Tuileries. There is no heir. Roads are rebuilt, laws reformed, the Franks stabilized. The Concordat with the Pope restores religion to a weary nation, a formal agreement that ends years of chaos between church and state. Catholicism, once outlawed during the Revolution, returns to French life as a unifying force. Napoleon does not serve the church, he contains it, bending it to the needs of a new France. France rises from its knees, not as a republic, but something imperial. Even as their vision expands, a shadow lingers in the halls of the Tuileries, the former palace of kings, which is now Napoleon's seat of power. Its gilded mirrors reflect ambition, but also unrest. In these walls where monarchy once fell, the ghosts of revolution still whisper. Gossip begins to spread amongst the people. There is no heir. Joséphine, now in her 40s, carries grace, but not the promise of succession. Behind closed doors, ministers whisper. Allies glance uneasily toward Austria and Russia, toward thrones secured by bloodlines, not brilliance. Napoleon delays. He speaks only of love, of loyalty, of what they've built. But the weight of empire grows heavier by the day, and the silence between them grows with it. In December 1804, Notre Dame rises like a fortress of faith and ambition. Its ancient arches glow with candlelight. The scent of incense clings to velvet robes and gilded crowns. The world watches. Emperors, envoys, kings, popes. Pope Pius VII sits upon his throne, summoned to bless Napoleon and Joséphine's coronation. But when the moment comes, Napoleon does not kneel. Instead, he lifts the crown himself, raises it high above his head, and places it there, alone. It is a gesture as bold as it is blasphemous, a message to every monarch in Europe. I owe my throne to no one. Then he turns, and gently, deliberately, he crowns Joséphine. Her eyes glisten, slightly with pride, but more with the deep ache of what it cost to arrive here, and the fear of what must come next. The choir swells, bells ring, the empire is born. And in that moment, they stand not as lovers or rulers, but as symbols. Their bond becomes more than private passion. It becomes the scaffolding of the modern French state. It becomes spectacle, legacy, myth. But beneath the triumph, the walls begin to crack. The people cheer, but diplomats press. Allies demand assurance, and the weight of a childless empire bears down with quiet cruelty. Their love had lifted them to the heights of history, but now that same love may not be enough to hold it all together. Their union, once the keystone of Napoleon's rise, now stands at odds with what the empire requires. Joséphine walks its halls with grace, but she knows what once strengthened France now leaves it exposed. The court whispers. Foreign powers watch. Without an heir, the empire's future teeters, and monarchs dangle daughters as keys to peace and power. Napoleon delays once more, torn between the woman who steadied his soul and the legacy his victories demand. But history grants no refuge for the heart. By candlelight, in rooms that once echoed with promises and laughter, they face what must be done. Joséphine's voice is steady, though her heart aches. She gives her blessing, not for herself, but for France. Napoleon's words are soft, but final. Filled with regret, no ceremony can ease. Their parting reshapes more than two lives. It binds France to Austria through marriage, anchors the empire to ancient thrones, but severs the bond that had given his rule its heart. The shield of love is gone, and with it, the soul that tempered his ambition. From that night, the cracks widen. Love sacrificed to power. Power hollowed by loss. The fate of Europe shifts, not by cannon's roar, but in the silence where two hands part for the last time. The ink on the divorce papers had barely dried when the court turned its gaze eastward. Austria, ancient, proud, and wounded by Napoleon's conquests. From its crumbling Habsburg throne came a fragile thread of peace, spun in the form of an alliance, and that alliance in the form of a girl. Marie-Louise, daughter of the Austrian emperor who once called Napoleon the scourge of Europe. Barely 19, her cheeks still soft with youth, her gaze steady but resigned. She did not come to Paris in love. She came in duty. A marriage to heal the wounds of war, a womb to give France its heir. The wedding was grand. Bells tolled, petals fell, cannons fired, but Joséphine was not there. She watched from afar, at Malmaison, surrounded by roses no longer meant for celebration, but for quiet mourning. Her place, once beside the emperor, now taken by a stranger whose crown fit easily, but whose soul had not walked through fire with him. Napoleon tried to hide the emptiness, but those closest to him saw it. Marie-Louise bore him a son, the long-awaited heir. France rejoiced. The dynasty, it seemed, was secured. But in private, he still wrote letters to Joséphine, still asked after her health, still sent rare flowers from his travels, still spoke of her, when wine softened his guard and memory overtook ambition. In the great halls of the Tuileries, a new empress reigned. But it was Joséphine who lingered in the tapestries of memory, in the hush that fell when her name was spoken, in the eyes of the man who had traded his heart for a throne. The empire she helped steady has slipped beyond her reach. But there amongst her gardens, touched by soft light, she remains a queen in all but name. The air is rich with lilac and regret. Paris has fallen. The map of Europe is redrawn, not by Napoleon's hand, but by his conquerors. The Tsar, the Kaiser, the kings and princes of old orders divide what was once his. Yet amid their triumph, they pause to honor Joséphine. Tsar Alexander, moved by her dignity, shields her from the fate that claims so many of Napoleon's allies. She is seen not as the wife cast aside, but as the soul of France that endured when empires crumbled. In 1814, after years of war and a disastrous campaign in Russia that left his army frozen and broken, the tide turns. The Allied forces, led by Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain, march on Paris. Napoleon is forced to abdicate. For all his victories, all his glory, it ends not with a final charge, but with exile. They send him to Elba, a tiny island off the coast of Italy, a cage with a crown. And yet even there, his thoughts return to her, to Joséphine, the one conquest that had no map, no borders, no peace. When news of her passing reaches him on May 29th, 1814, as spring touches Europe's scarred fields, those close to him see the blow strike deeper than any defeat. And in his final days, when breath comes hard and the horizon fades, the names on his lips are few: France, the army, and Joséphine. Their love did not survive the demands of empire, but it shaped the fate of nations, altered the course of kings, and left a legacy no crown or treaty could erase. And so, dear listener, as you rest, let this story linger in your heart. The tale of Napoleon and Joséphine was never just a romance. It was a thread woven through the fabric of an age. Their passion crowned emperors, bound thrones, and shattered alliances. Their parting redrew the map of Europe. Their love, fragile, defiant, and imperfect, shaped destinies far beyond their own, and left its mark not just on parchment or crown, but in the memory of history itself. It is love, in the end, its joys, its wounds, its haunting memory, that outlasts empires, endures where banners fall, and lingers where history fades. May their journey bring you comfort tonight, as you drift into dreams, knowing that what we give of the heart is never truly lost.